Welcome back to Deal Flow Live. We are live right now. This is the show where we break down business deals, businesses that are listed online for sale. We talk about what kind of person would buy this business. We talk about the value of the business. Is it overpriced? Is it underpriced? What are our thoughts? We ultimately give you a great picture of whether this would make sense to buy for you or someone else that is in this industry. Got to break down the things that you would want to be thinking about if you were buying a business or if you were selling a business. I'm one of your hosts, Brody Vinson.
I'm your other host, Ryan Santo.
And today we're diving into a granite business. Ryan, why did we decide on a granite business?
Recently, there has been some developments where you have specifically been working with somebody who owns a granite or granite adjacent business. So I thought, since normally we are focusing on home services and kind of where our wheelhouse is, this is kind of an expansion of experience. And I thought it'd be cool to kind of do this one because we see a lot of these. So we don't really know what's going on. But now that you have a little bit of insider knowledge, it'd be cool to explore this.
I agree. I mean, it's been a very interesting industry to get to know, and a business to see, how it operates. I'll be honest, like completely transparent here. I did not expect there to be this much money in granite. There is a lot of money in granite. The business that we're working with right now is what they do is they fabricate granite pieces, and then they have installers that install them. So they've got like this workshop and then an office and a showroom. They have guys that are kind of working in the workshop, fabricating the piece of granite, getting it to what it needs to look like, the specs that they agree on. And then they have installers that they pay to go actually install it for the customer in their home. And many times, produce these beautiful countertops, islands, and things like that. And the ticket prices on these things is pretty high. For anyone who's ever had this done, you probably telling you something you already know here. But for anyone who hasn't had this done, the ticket prices on granite installation are quite high. And there's a lot of it needing to be done here in Central Florida. So as we kind of dug in with this business, we came in to just help them kind of get some of their operations in place. And we realized they were making a whole hell of a lot of money. They just needed to get a little bit more organized. And it's been cool to see how that process is playing out. So I thought we could take a look, and I could kind of shed some light on what the margins are here, whether that seems typical, and like maybe see if it's the same type of business model, who this would make sense for, and that sort of thing. So they're asking $1.5 million for this business right off the bat. I see that's, it's $369,000 of cash flow. That is about, it's going to be a high multiple, I think. 369,000. It's right about a 4 times multiple.
Mm-hmm.
As I say that, it's not crazy. It's a little high for this level. I would probably expect it to be at a little bit more of a 3x multiple. Maybe they have some flexibility on the price. The other thing I notice immediately, though, is, to give you an idea, the business that we're working with right now is at about 27% profit margins.
Mm-hmm.
This business seems to be significantly lower than that, like significantly lower. So I would want to understand why that is. And that presents a pretty big risk for the business in my mind. What do you think?
Well, I think you scrolled down. They said 4 employees.
I saw 10.
Okay, let's see how many employees.
Now, my guess would be that a lot of those people are not full-time, but I might be wrong.
Because, I mean, that 10 still doesn't validate that amount of
cost.
Yeah, I mean, unless they're being paid very, very well, which I don't think that's the case. It sounds like this is just a massive mismanagement, or they're not able, or they're not really delivering or quoting correctly. Because I can't imagine that you just found the unicorn. I feel like there's a lot of these businesses out there, and they must all have pretty good margins of varying degrees, but this is drastically lower.
It really is. I'm trying to figure out an actual number on it for us. It's a little under 12% margins.
Yeah, that's nearly half of, that's 50% less of almost than what you're working with.
More than, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the ones that we're working with, it's more than double the margins. And to be honest, it's barely lower on cash flow. for about three, or it's barely higher on cash flow. This one for almost 3 times the size of volume running through.
That's insane. So
It
there's just
is.
there's an issue here.
Yeah, there does seem to be a pretty big issue. I mean, they're paying a lot more in rent. I can tell you that. Far more in rent. We don't really get to see much more of their expenses than that. But it does seem like they're overpaying for that. I wouldn't be surprised if they're overpaying for some employees. I wouldn't be surprised if they're underpriced too. That
Yeah,
could
they
be
may be
part of
not
it.
quoting correctly, which is as simple as getting some competitor information, and then you can outsource that by training a chat bot to essentially quote based on everything else around you, and you can kind of automate that to a degree. Maybe they're not
If
sourcing
you
well.
run a business even remotely like this, Ryan just dropped some sauce for you. So I hope you rewind that, listen to that, and that could very much streamline your process.
Aren't you making a video about how to utilize ChatGPT for quotes?
I should.
I thought you were, but either way, you kind of pioneered that, and you chatting over, and I was like, damn, that is you get that $20 a month premium. You feed it this information, you train it, it can start doing rough estimate quotes for you without you having to have somebody pick up the phone or respond to an email. That's crazy. So that's something that everybody should be looking into if they have anything that involves quoting.
Now, when you see a business like this, Ryan, why does something like this pique your interest, and who do you think it would make sense to for buying a business like this?
I like this because I know that granite is something that is kind of a luxury. I say kind of because varying degrees of granite, but I'm not going to get into my earth sciences degree there. But there's constantly people building new houses, tearing down new houses, and even existing plans. People want a different countertop. They buy a house, they want all new countertops. So it's a business that's
Granite's
fairly
kind of becoming the
evergreen.
standard.
I mean, it's been a high end quality thing for a while, but I think with all these new apartments, people renovate apartments, people want granite in their apartments. So I think it's an evergreen sort of system with that. I do think that without having your experiences with the granite businesses, I think we might have looked at this previously and be like 12%. That's not bad. This wouldn't have looked as terrible to us if we didn't know that what some people were doing in the area just as a regular business owners. And I think that's something that we harp on a lot is don't go into something that you don't have a minimum understanding about. It can be as simple as saying, okay, well, it's just, they have too much business that they don't know how to handle. We can just market it. That's true. But on the other hand, you could buy into this and find out that you just inherited a whole bunch of problems and a really terrible margin when everybody around you is eating your lunch.
Very well could be. And that's part of what my concern would be with a business like this, where you just know that they're far below the industry mark for profit margin. Those issues could be very systemic. They could be, they could be something that you could change easily, or they could not be. You never really know until you get into a business and kind of look under the hood. But, when these profit margin issues are things that are glaringly obvious to change and fix, that's one thing that, could attract the right type of operator if they think they can make a huge return compared to what they paid for it. It's another thing that if you don't have a lot of experience and you don't know how to recognize those opportunities and you're just hoping to run this business and keep it cash flowing the way it has been, that could be a huge issue for you, because that means that the business hasn't historically adapted to what it needs to beat the market and to be there with the market. So, you're going to have to really bend over backwards to find those tips and tricks that the other competitors are using. You're kind of coming in behind already.
And that's not to say you can't learn or that you couldn't come in and figure it out as you went along, but you definitely want a bit more of a cushion than 12% margin at that point, which I mean, hey, 300 something ain't anything to turn your nose up at. But it's also a question of, all right, how much of that is going to be repurposed back into the business? Like you could be sinking another 220 just to make the repairs you needed that first year. And likely you got debt servicing, so you got to account for that. So you could essentially go to zero if you're not careful, just on debt servicing and internally repairing the business. So another big concern when you think about that.
Yeah. All that being said, I do think it would be productive for us to give a grade to this business and just kind of like tell the viewers what we think, out of, you know, A to B to C to D to F scale, where does this business fall? Um, I'm going to give this business personally a C. I honestly, it's got decent cash flow and it's not it's not horribly overpriced. It is a great business. I would love to have a business in this industry, knowing what I know. Does pass the smell check as far as how long it's been established with what we like to talk about. It is almost 10 years old. But there are some real issues under the hood with this profit margin, and that really scares me.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a C minus because I'm gonna consider what information we currently have about what is being worked on as the average. We're gonna consider the client the average. So being below average on all, across the board clearly by this, I can't in good faith give a C. It had to be a C minus. I'm closer to a D plus, but I think that this industry has a lot of turnaround. And I do not I think that this is an industry where there is a lot of more work than there are people doing the work type situation. So I think that with the right turnaround and the right amount of just injection, whether that be from a company existing buying this one, I think as a bolt-on, it's a B. I think as a standalone, it's a C minus. So that would be my caveat there. You could do it, you could learn it on your own, but your curve, it might be really steep as compared to somebody who has everything. It just goes, okay, I'll acquire this. Maybe they bought it because the granite alone is worth that much and they're just going to fix what they need to. But I would say also you have to worry about sourcing materials in this line of work. Given that we're in the United States and we have all these crazy tariff things, they're up, they're down, they're left, they're right. They're all over the place. Nobody can tell what's going on. When you're sourcing something like this that comes from other parts of the country and the world, your supply chains can get royally tangled up. So we could be seeing a lot of these businesses start to struggle over the next few months because even though we're in the beginning of it, it really won't be felt till around summer is what most people are saying. So
yeah,
that's why I would carefully caution people of jumping into this one.
Agreed. Yeah, there's definitely some considerations there, and we don't really know how that's going to play out. We would have to understand more about this business's particular suppliers. If they're local and they're paying more, that could almost be seen as a plus here from a risk mitigation standpoint. But yeah, I think that's a fair grade that you gave it.
Do you agree with that? Bolt-on gives it a better grade than a standalone, or are you going to stick with your C if it was a bolt-on too?
I would still stick with my C. Okay. I think, the fundamentals of the business don't change too much. I would almost make it a worse grade as a bolt-on.
Really?
Because, well, actually, what? I see where you're coming from, because they're probably going to have better operations, better like supply pricing and all of that sort of thing with the platform company.
At the very least, they've just bought some inventory. So
there is a lot of FF&E here. We didn't talk about that much. There's a lot of inventory and FF&E. I do know from working with one of these businesses, they are very inventory heavy. They usually end up with a lot of like these big slabs of like unfinished stuff that can be repurposed for smaller pieces after the fabricating is done. So there genuinely is probably a lot of worth there. That can be used for new projects. So we didn't talk about that too much. That does change things with the valuation a little bit. I kind of see a little bit more where they're coming from. But I think my grade is going to stand.
Okay, that's a strong point. I'll respect it.
Well, anything else you would want to comment on this one?
No, I think that just kind of as a more of a macro view of the entire thing, that especially where we're looking at businesses right now, you always have to consider that if you're looking to make that jump, what sort of industry are you getting into? What are the nuts and bolts of the businesses? No pun intended. Because with everything kind of going all weird in the economy right now, you have to consider many more aspects to how a business sources what it does. A pottery business, a granite business, even a home services HVAC business, it's all going to be a little different. So I think we're going to see a lot more businesses that are going up for sale with tighter margins just due to supplies, being a little more, everything going up. But I think that if you have the wherewithal, you should bet on your knowledge, not on the industry. Just because an industry may not look as profitable, if you have knowledge, you can make it more profitable than the other people in there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, to your point about some things going crazy in the economy, I think we'll probably do a future episode, maybe in the next week or two, on what kind of ramifications some of those have on the business buying landscape right now, because there's a lot of things happening. Ryan and I were just talking about some major changes underway for the SBA that are already happening and tightening even more as we go. So stay tuned for a future episode. We're going to cover that because these are the things that you need to know if you're thinking about buying a business. One of the biggest routes to buying a business has changed a lot, gotten a lot more difficult, and you got to know what your options are and how you can still get a deal done.
And from the broker side, Brody, I'm just going to throw this last one out there. Y'all aren't going to comp anything. Y'all aren't going out there saying, oh man, it's hard to get a loan now, we should put a discount on these things to attract more cash buyers. I mean, the business owners are just as motivated, if not more, to sell now. And it just got a lot harder for people to get cash. So that's what people are going to have to decide. Do I want to sell it? Because, do you want to sell to a company, or you're trying to sell to a person? There's some moral dilemmas that people face.
Certainly. So we'll unpack all of that as we get underway in the next couple episodes here. Stay tuned if this is something you're seriously considering for these future episodes, because you need to know how this landscape is changing and how it affects your plan. And if you enjoyed any of the topics that we covered here on this episode, head over to scaleforsale.com. Check out what Ryan and I do when we work with business owners. Let us know if you have any questions that pertain to businesses that maybe you run or someone runs. If you are a business owner and you want to understand, how to consider these things, whether you're looking to eventually sell or you're just looking to remove yourself a little bit more from the business. At Scale for Sale, we help business owners remove themselves, build systems, scale their profit smarter and more profitably. And so head over to scaleforsale.com to check that out. In the meantime, we will see you on the next episode. Tune in every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Roundabout.
We'll catch you then.